Good morning. I want to thank the music team and Gloria and I for reading. This is the first week of a 7-week series on Win the Day. 7 daily habits to help you stress less and accomplish more. It's a book by Mark Batterson. And I plan to emphasize the stress less part because I think many of us are already overachievers. And along the way, you most definitely will be hearing how to accomplish more of what you want in your own life. Each week will be totally independent, but I truly hope that you can make it for all 7 weeks. Today our focus is flip the script. You know, truly the present moment is a gift. And in his book, Mark Batterson invites us to win the day by living our life in day-type compartments, doing whatever we're trying to conquer for just a day, changing those seemingly unbreakable habits for just a day, going after our God-sized goals for just a day. If we become paralyzed by the past, things that we can't change, or become crippled by all of our thinking about the future, which we can't control, it becomes difficult for us to move forward in this moment. Sir William Osler, who is the founder of Hopkins School of Medicine, put it this way: the load of tomorrow, added to that of yesterday, carried today, makes the strongest falter. Batterson took these words to heart and used the words to encourage us to define what is important today, to win the day. Imagine what might happen if you started right now to live for today, being in the present moment. So here's your question for the week. What is the one choice that you can make today to flip your script, to change your story, so as to win the day and embrace your God-sized goals, one day-type compartment at a time? One more time. What is the one choice that you can make today to flip your script, to change your story, so as to win the day and embrace your God-sized goals, one day-type compartment at a time? I want to begin by talking about conquering whatever it is that you've been working on just for a day. Batterson begins his book by saying this: if you want to change your life, start by changing your story. In the announcements, the quote from Mark Batterson is what he calls his hypothesis. And just in case you missed it, it said, almost anybody can accomplish anything if they work at it long enough, hard enough, and smart enough. When you were growing up and someone close to you, perhaps a family member, loved you very much, did they give you a nickname? My grandpa Heyl used to call my sister Princess and me Duchess, and it was a sign of special affection from him. He provided us a name that was really just his to use. No one else called us by those names. And you might notice that famous Hollywood stars rename themselves because they believe a different name might make a difference. Think about Cassius Clay when he renamed himself to Muhammad Ali. In the Bible, when Jacob's name was changed to Israel, it was more than a name change. It was a new identity and a new nation. Often there's history in a name. Our names have significance, and we might know that the name our parents gave us is just a placeholder because we are God's creation and God has a special name just for each of us. God flips our scripts by changing our names, by allowing us to adopt those qualities that make us all that we can be. If your life is not what you want it to be, think about the story you're writing. If we say history slow enough, it's his story. Perhaps you need to rewrite your story, to flip the script of your life so that what you tell yourself is more in alignment with what you want your life to be. Think about that for a minute. Perhaps you need to rename who you are in your own mind's eye, to give yourself a nickname. I know many of you perhaps do not have the book Win the Day, so I asked Bob Wirtz to read a story which I believe is quite pertinent to how the scripts that we tell ourselves impact what we're able to accomplish in our lives.
On August 22, 1851, Commodore John Cox Stevens and his 6-man crew won the America's Cup in a 53-mile regatta around the Isle of Wight. The race was witnessed by Queen Victoria, who reportedly asked which yacht was second. The infamous answer? Your Majesty, there is no second. Thus began one of the most impressive winning streaks in history. The New York Yacht Club, of which Commodore Stevens was a founding member, successfully defended the cup for 132 years. They were undefeated until September 26, 1983, when the Australia II, skippered by John Bertrand, ended the longest winning streak in sporting history with a 41-second margin of victory. That win was a milestone moment for Australia, hailed like a national holiday. Even America tipped its hat to the Australia II. It was awarded Athlete of the Year by ABC's Wide World of Sports. I'm not sure how a boat wins that award, but that's water under the bridge. The question is this: how was the Australia II able to do what no one else had done in 132 years? A winged keel designed by Dutch engineers certainly gave the Australian team a technical advantage, but that wasn't what won the race. If you haven't tasted victory in 132 years, it's hard to imagine any outcome other than defeat. The first thing you need to do is convince yourself that winning is possible. How? The answer is the first habit. Flip the script. You've got to rewrite your narrative by telling yourself a different story, a better story. Several years before the 1983 America's Cup, the Australian skipper, Mike Fletcher, had read the classic novella Jonathan Livingston Seagull. The moral of that story: begin by knowing what you have already arrived. Sounds like Stephen Covey's second habit of highly effective people. Begin with the end in mind. Inspired by Seagull's storyline, Fletcher made a recording of the Australian team winning the race. The recording included narration and the sound of a sailboat cutting through the water. A copy of that recording was given to each member of the crew, and they were instructed to listen to it twice a day. They did this, get this, every day for 3 years. Before even setting sail, they had won the race 2,190 times. How did the Australian team bury a long losing streak? They flipped the flipping script. They told themselves a different story over and over again. They won the race because they won the day. 1,095 days in a row.
So I wonder where in your life you need a new script, a new identity that allows you to embrace a win in some area of your life. Where in your life might you start practicing today for something that you desire to be yours in the future, the same way that the yacht club members did? Where do you need to start writing your life so that it becomes something worth telling stories about? Is there a failure that has you defeated in some way? A rejection that's thwarted your ability to trust? Or a trauma that amputated a part of your personality? You know, our country deals with a lot of death, and the tragedy or trauma of death often sends people into some grief that they never are quite the same afterwards. Batterson encourages us to live in day-type compartments. Take the failure for a day. Don't allow that defeat to continually to show up. Take the rejection and for a day, trust again fully and completely and see how that changes your life. Take the tragedy or the trauma and for a day, live as though it never happened. That's what we mean by win the day. It requires us to bury our yesterdays. What I have come to know in my life is that to bury my dead yesterdays, those things that I am not, or those things that I don't want to perpetuate in my life, I have to come to grips with who I am. And the same is true of you. You have to come to grips with who you are. How often do you remember your own magnificence? The opening song today reminded us that I'm here to remind myself of my magnificence. Lucky you if someone in your life does that for you as well. Furthermore, you need to be the one to remember that you are a masterpiece of the divine, a unique, one-of-a-kind creation. If you were presented with a Michelangelo masterpiece or with a Mozart original composition, how special would you feel? Well, hello. God presented you with all your unique talents and gifts, the ones that only you can use. Should you not be equally as grateful to be that masterpiece of any other fabulous artist? You are a given masterpiece of God. You. What are you waiting for to start writing your script as though you are that masterpiece of the divine? A work of art so precious that it's actually priceless. You know, on cattle ranches, they take the best cattle dog and then they breed it. When the litter comes, they take the smallest part of the litter, the smallest runt of the litter, and they tie a string around its leg. The runts have to work harder to get food, to grow, to achieve, and they have the biggest hearts. So when they give away all of the puppies, they keep the runt because they know that while it's not as big as the others, and maybe has to work harder to become capable, the runt has the biggest heart. Where in your life do you feel like you're the runt of the litter? Not as big as others, not as capable. It's time to flip that script. No masterpiece of the divine is incapable of anything. I'm going to repeat that. No masterpiece of the divine is incapable of anything. How do you think the world would look if we each gave thanks for our own uniqueness and for our own abilities? Today, Gloria read that most of us never question where or when we develop our perceptions. And yet, it's our perceptions that drive our decisions about the world and about other people. Don't you think it's about time that we examine our belief systems in a real way? When you begin to do your own internal examination, which indeed is the internal healing work, you'll begin to ask yourself more and more often, oh, where did that idea come from? Or is what I'm thinking really true? Is it absolutely true? The truth is that most of our suffering comes from believing things that truly are just illusions of our own perceptions and making up scripts. We do it all the time. We make up scripts that aren't true and then we live by them. It's time to flip the script. The Course in Miracles tells us that we're never upset for the reason that we think. And then it later tells us we are upset because we see something that's not there, because we perceive something that's part of our own belief system. What we're actually seeing is our own reality, our perception of the situation, which quite often is not at all accurate. Rather than holding other people at fault, including yourself, by the way, what if we recognize that everybody was this magnificent masterpiece of the divine, and that we looked on them from that viewpoint, from truly being works of art, works of divine creation? We don't all like the same kind of art. I know that there's some art that I look at and I wonder, oh, that's really, and I frame it as ugly. Or I think, looks like a 6-year-old did that one. That's part of life. There are possibly some of the divine's masterpieces that you're not meant to hang out with, and that's perfectly okay. We don't have to hang out with people that we don't really appreciate how they show up in the world. I love that affirmation at the end of the reading today. I look for the good everywhere, and there it is. If we look for something that's not good, guess what? We typically see it. If we look for the faults in others, we're going to see their faults. And if we look for the good in others, there it is. In Win the Day, and also in other self-help books, we're reminded that we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. To win the day, we must be able to rewrite our scripts, to flip our scripts so that they're more in alignment of who we want to be. And this takes practice. Practice focused in such a way as to create results, just like the Australian yacht team came to create results and win after 132 years of losing. After all, if you practice something the wrong way, hours on end, all you've done is create bad habits without positive results. Anders Ericsson has a 3-dimensional practice to obtain results, and he calls it deliberate practice. It has 3 dimensions: well-defined goals. We define our goals specifically so that we can measure how well we're doing, measure our results, and get some feedback along the way. The second dimension is reverse engineering. We study other people that have done something similar or along the same lines, and then we take their best practices, adopting them to our unique situation. How do the tricks of the trade relate to you? When we take somebody else's ideas that were successful for them, we need to adopt them to our own personalities, to our own ways of doing things. The third dimension is effort. And in this effort, he talks about the just manageable difficulty. Have you ever started something and been so gung-ho that you injured yourself in some way? Maybe you made yourself so sore that you didn't want to continue it, or you burn out on it right away. We need to do something a bit out of our comfort zone, stretch ourselves, but not to the point that we're willing to quit whatever it is that we're seeking. My mama used to say, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And to some degree, that got me into trouble in my life because I became a perfectionist, and sometimes you just have to know that it's good enough. Ericsson had this to say about his deliberate practice. There is no point at which performance maxes out, and additional practice does not lead to further improvement. Some people argue that it takes 10,000 hours to master something. I happen to agree with Erickson that we spend a lifetime practicing, and we need to continue to improve no matter what the task. If we each spent time every day in deliberate spiritual practice, how do you think the world might improve? I think his practice methods apply to all aspects of our lives. We need to practice loving each other more. We need to practice writing our scripts so that they define the stories that we want to have to be true for us. We need to practice loving ourselves and forgiving ourselves so that we can be that masterpiece of the divine, so that we can see it when we look in the mirror. As our reading today said, who knew that life could be so beautiful by just changing the lens through which we see? So in summary, I invite you to live your life in day-type compartments. Compartments that are filled with scripts that support who you are and who you're becoming. Flip your script, rewrite your story. Be more like the Australians in pursuit of that American Cup. Come to grips with and embrace who you really are, a masterpiece of the divine who is priceless. When you have a thought that's not supporting you, flip your script. Look for the good everywhere and you'll see it. And incorporate that deliberate practice in your life. Learn to set well-defined goals. Use reverse engineering. Look at what other people are doing that's successful and apply it in a way that it applies to you. And put some effort into it. Who knew that life could be so beautiful? By just changing the lens through which we see. So here's your affirmation for the week. How is it today? I so easily and willingly make the one choice to flip my script, to change my story, so as to win the day and embrace my God-sized goals, one day-type compartment at a time. I'm going to challenge you this week to live in day-type compartments. Just for a day, do those things that make you uncomfortable, but that stretch who you are. Remember each day, at some point in the day, to recognize yourself as the masterpiece of the divine. And know that about every person that you encounter. Flip any script that tarnishes that masterpiece. And when a new day arrives, begin the challenge all over again. Let's pray. So just taking a deep, nourishing breath. Recognizing that the divine is all that is. The God that is within each of us, because we are an expression of that divine, has created a masterpiece that we call by whatever name is our name. That masterpiece is not flawed, and it's capable of anything that each of us set our minds to do. What I know to be the truth is that right where we are, all that is God is flowing in, through, and as each of us. That there is nothing that we can tell ourselves to diminish that we are indeed unique creations of God, priceless masterpieces that deserve the honor that we give other masterpieces in life. So I am grateful. I am grateful to know that just by changing the lens through which I look, my life becomes so much more beautiful. I'm grateful to know that as a masterpiece and creation of the divine, I am capable of anything that I decide to do with deliberate practice. I'm grateful to know that each day when I look in the mirror, I can remember that I am a masterpiece of the divine and that everybody I encounter is the same. So it's with great gratitude that I release these words into the law of mind, spirit, and action, knowing the truth that wherever we are, the divine is, that God has already called all of this good. And so I can just know that it's done, say amen, and we can affirm it together. And so it is.